What's up, guys, and welcome to Press A Repeatedly. Justin Tomasello here with Chris Gold.
Hey, howdy, hey.
And Chris, today, well, here's the thing. We usually start the show with some kind of weird banter, but I don't know, man. I got nothing to really talk about right now.
Yeah, let me just check the news real quick. Never mind. Let's not talk about any of that.
So, Chris, we don't have anything to really banter about today, but we have a very interesting topic for later in the episode. Do you want to give us kind of a heads up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We decided to do a little bit of work this week. Very unusual for our show, I know. But we decided to do a little research and talk about one of the most influential and one of the most popular gaming franchises of all time. That, of course, is Tetris. So we are actually going to give a peek behind the curtain, the Iron Curtain, if you will. And we're going to kind of look into some fun facts about Tetris as a game and as a franchise. Plus, we're going to be kind of giving like a 50,000-foot overview of the history of Tetris during its development process, how it came over to the United States and the world from the old Soviet Union. And I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, when you brought this up earlier in the week, I thought it was a great idea for us to not only do some sort of new kind of segment for the show, but to also learn about probably one of the most influential video games of all time, and maybe look up some facts that we may have already known and some stuff that you guys may not have known before. So looking forward to it, and we'll be getting into that a little bit later on.
Yep, fun and educational. Mr. Rogers would be proud.
Fun-educational.
Mr. Rogers is disappointed again. But we can start off the show, Justin, with an email that we received from one of our nearest and dearest friends.
Emails.
This email is a pretty long one, and it comes to us from friend of the show, Matt Rupert. He calls it "Press A when you're supposed to," which is not right, Matt. You have to press A repeatedly. It's in the title.
He's clearly not paying attention.
No, he has to listen more often, but that's on him. Let's see. So, Matt's email. Dear JNC, Justin and Chris, not to be mistaken for Jesus and Christ.
That's the other podcast that we do.
Yeah. Worship God repeatedly. Yeah, that one is not nearly as popular as this podcast, which, you look at the numbers, is pretty sad.
Yeah.
But we do the best we can. Anyway, Dear JNC, a few weeks ago, you guys rapped about storytelling in video games for a nice chunk of time, and I have some thoughts. It is well known that I am a sucker for good story, or at the very least, well-driven story. Side note to any of our listeners out there who don't know Matt, he is a sucker for story.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the deal. Most of the time, when people say story, they just mean the narrative arc. Some modern games I've played have really phenomenal narrative arcs. Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption, Gone Home, Mass Effect 2. Fight me if you disagree, great arc, he says about Mass Effect 2. The Last of Us, BioShock, and some I haven't played apparently do too. Horizon Zero Dawn, Life is Strange, Firewatch, Nier Automata, What Remains of Edith Finch, and others not coming to mind. God of War, from what I've heard, is every bit as amazing as all of the above. But what's missing here is what actually makes these good story games. He bold, italics, and underlines story. And that's where narrative elements come in. Y'all remember middle and high school English? You learned about something we educators call story elements. This is what makes a story good. That narrative arc is really just three parts of it: the plot, the conflict, and the resolution. Like Zool said, the characters really matter too, but so also does the setting. Think about your favorite story games and think about what makes them great. BioShock has an incredible underwater world setting, but not that much character building. It's also greatly affected by the mood and tone, the use of sound, of color palettes, of perspectives. Plenty of games are almost carried by the setting, and that's still story. Breath of the Wild contains one of my all-time favorite settings, even if there is very little character development and the plot is as basic as plots come. It's still a good story because it draws you into its world, just not a great story. It's also obviously benefited by its size, its scope, its color, its history, its combat, etc. But getting back to my point, the best and lasting stories are carried by character. Witcher 3 has Geralt and a bevy of other wonderful characters. In fact, the narrative arc is really just competent in Witcher 3. Its real accomplishment is how the story is unfolded through gameplay, through conversations and new characters and new places, and it's well written and well acted. Dragon Age Inquisition has a host of interesting backstories that can or cannot be developed, and it honestly plays a bit like an interactive novel, though admittedly also not the greatest narrative arc, but it unfolds almost flawlessly, including scenes and storylines that are purely story and character development. John fucking Marston is the main reason Red Dead became such an institution. And what I am finding particularly interesting is that a character developed in a previous iteration of the game continues to benefit from that character building. Nathan Drake, Shepard, a bunch of the characters from Mass Effect, which I now kind of want to play again. You can even make arguments for non-narrative, repeating characters as being well developed over time, the Mario franchise, Sonic franchise, etc., though I'm not inclined to consider them great stories, but interesting, repetitive gameplay. Y'all, I'm just typing random shit that comes to my mind as a break from my work. This is not a well-developed thesis. Many apologies, I'll type more shit later. Also, he notes, I dig this font of the email. And that was Matt.
Matt, thanks for writing in, of course. And, you know, I didn't really think about, when we did that episode about our stories, stories in gaming, how he kind of laid it out there, where it's all like ingredients, right, of one big delicious outcome, I guess. If we're going to go with like a food narrative here.
Right. It's like the cheese in a cheeseburger, right? You know, the cheese is great, but there's many ingredients to the burger that makes it a good burger.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, like, he's got a great point. Like, the narrative arc of the story, like the writing, that's only one part of it, you know, because you have to be in the world and you have to relate to the characters as well. And in terms of character, I 100% agree with what he said about John Marston. I mean, if you take Red Dead Redemption and take out the character of John Marston and replace him with just like a generic like cowboy action hero, that game would just instantly be forgotten. Like, that entire, the feeling that you get from that game is just the redemption story of John Marston, who that keeps you driving in that game, keeps you interested. You know, this is a guy who's made some mistakes, he wants to atone for them, and you really want to see him and help him, you know, get to that, like, that the higher side, you know. And to not have that element in the game at all, like, it would totally fall flat.
Yeah, I agree. And like, it's not even just, you know, the actual story that progresses the games, but like Matt was saying too, the settings. I agree with him completely that Breath of the Wild, its setting, helps sell the story of the game so very, very well. Like, you look at Breath of the Wild, and this is Hyrule, but this is clearly a Hyrule that is in ruin. You look around and you explore the entire world, and you see houses are broken down. Some of them are showing signs of, like, they've been burned. There's just all sorts of ruin and decay all across the land. And it's obvious that the world is now in an apocalyptic setting. Take a look at even the Fallout series, where you discover just random areas where, like, say you go into an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere, and you pick the lock, and you find a locked door, and you pick the lock, and inside it's a bathroom, and there's a skeleton lying in the bathtub, and next to the bathtub is like a knife and some other assorted items there, and you just like your mind puts the piece together. You're like, oh my god, like this. Those moments help sell the story and make the world feel richer and deeper and help tell a better story than if you just said, oh, here you go save the princess, the world is in danger.
Right, and if you think about it, it's not so much what you know that makes a good story. A lot of it is what you don't know, right? Which is why I love the Bioshock example that you mentioned in the email. It's like, you kind of start off in that game and you're not really sure where you are and what's going on and like why the world is like this and how the whole underwater mechanics kind of come into play. And damn you for stealing this, but Fallout, I was just going to say the same thing. You wake up in a vault, and what happened outside, but you don't know what exactly is going on now. And then in most of the games, you have to venture, well, all the games actually, you have to venture out of the vault and explore for yourself and see all these like twisted creatures and like dilapidated buildings, and basically just kind of see how all of mankind that was remaining, how they've shifted, how they've adapted to live and thrive in this nuclear wasteland. Like that kind of stuff, I mean, it can even lend to help you build a better narrative with just having these elements in the play. So it's a really interesting take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful food for thought. Yeah, Matt, I have to disagree. I thought it was a pretty well-developed thesis from you. Thank you for writing in. Of course, we'd love to talk more about this with anyone else. If you have any thoughts on story in gaming or any other topic that we've covered in the past, please feel free to email us at parpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, thanks for writing in. And his list of games with great stories I thought was pretty spot on. And hope you're enjoying God of War right now. I'm sure you're a bit deeper in it now than you were at the time of the email. So if you got more thoughts on that, feel free to hit us up.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so that was the only email we received, sadly, unfortunately. But, for right now, I feel like this is as good a time as any to roll into What Are You Playing?
What are you playing? Yes, Chris, it sure is. And while I am still playing God of War, I don't have too much to report on that. I'm a bit farther. But I took a little break from God of War actually this week, and I dove back into a game that I was pretty close to beating but kind of put on the shelf for a while, and I wanted to wrap up, and that was Steamworld Dig 2.
Oh, shit.
Yes, I finally beat Steamworld Dig 2 over the week, and welcome
to Nick and me 2 months ago.
And Butch.
And everyone else.
Yeah, and the rest of the world. It's so crazy because I didn't start playing SteamWorld Dig 2 until January, but it did come out about midway through 2017, and we did our whole end of the year game ranking list episode. And if I had played this game when it came out, it drastically would have changed my top 10. I think it definitely would have been in my top 3 and maybe would have been in my top 2. I think that I like this game that much.
I can't really disagree too much with that assessment. I mean, I'd have to go back and recheck my my end of the year list, but I mean, last year, if you'll remember, was an absolutely stacked year for games, and
yes,
I really loved SteamWorld Dig 2. Also, I don't know if it would have ranked as highly on my personal list, but yeah, I can absolutely see the appeal of this game. It's just so tight and so phenomenally designed and built and just so good.
It's just the progression system works so well in that game. And, it's a game that does kind of rely a bit on some backtracking, but because of the way you get new abilities that allow you to travel further and easier, it makes the backtracking feel less like a chore. And in a way, you're almost kind of looking forward to going back to places that you couldn't get to earlier, because oh, now I have this jetpack, so I can fly up to an area that I couldn't get to before, and maybe I missed some treasure up there. Maybe there's some like hidden icons I haven't gotten yet, and it's just every upgrade that you get just adds a little bit more to your exploration, and it helps you from like kind of splurging like too early on, right? Like if you got that jetpack like really early on in the game and you could go anywhere, I feel like you would tire out of the game, pretty quickly. But the way they space that out, like first you don't have anything, and then you get the grappling hook, and then you get the jetpack, and then you get like an extension for the jetpack, and you can fly a little farther. Like all these things are just they're used so well, and the points of interest are scattered so well that it really makes that the entire experience of playing the game, like you don't ever grow tired of it. And that's another thing, that the game is only about 9-10 hours long, depending on how you play it. I clocked it around at 13 because I did a lot of exploring. I was trying to get all like those like statues that you can get from all the different little like caves that you can go in.
Right.
I didn't get them all. I finished the game about like a 77%, I think. And maybe I'll go back and get some more, but just that ability to be able to kind of go and get those things along the way or at any point that you want to. It just really had a great flow. And I love the art style. I love the character designs, all the cool robots in the town. And the artwork at the end of the game, too, at the end credits, is like this really cool hand-drawn, like almost like comic style pictures of Dot and Rusty and like all the other characters as you're literally blasting off into space. Like, I just thought that was so cool. And it kind of leads into possibly another game, Steamworld Dig 3 maybe, and I would be so pumped if that came out, and I would pick it up immediately. If you haven't played this game yet and you're into sort of like a collecty kind of game that has really atmospheric and like really great music, definitely give this one a look.
Did you ever play the original Steamworld Dig?
I did play the original. I had it for 3DS. It's a good game. I feel like the progression system and kind of like items that you can get throughout the game aren't as well developed as they are in the sequel. So I think the first one suffered from feeling a little stale and getting a little repetitive kind of too early on. I did not make it that far because I actually, when I had that game on a 3DS, it was like a corrupted game download or something, and it started crashing, and I couldn't play it anymore. I had to like re-download it, and I just never got around to doing that again. But yeah, that was like the only time I've ever seen that happen. It was really weird.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm glad to finally welcome you into the realm of having beaten Steamworld Dig 2. We have refreshments and streamers and balloons all over the place. You get a nice little T-shirt, a beer cozy.
That's great. Actually, sounds really good.
Yeah, it's a pretty good setup. I'm 100% with you. They ever release Steamworld Dig 3, I'm gonna be all over that. Steamworld Dig 2 is just so good. I had never played the original, but honestly, after having played and beaten Steamworld Dig 2, now I want to go back and play the original so I can get Rusty's story, and then I'll feel better prepared for hopefully someday when 3 comes out.
I believe Steamworld Dig 1 recently was re-released on the Switch. I could be wrong, but I think
you're right.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're right. I just have been lazy.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
What else you got?
So, after the success of that, I said, okay, well, I have other games that I'm pretty far in, but I haven't beaten yet, particularly on the Switch. And, I've talked about this before in the pod, but Wonder Boy, The Dragon's Trap, I started playing that again. And this was a little harder because that game is just laid out so weird, and I don't know where to go, and like you kind of have to pick a direction and like hope it's the right one. And I picked a few, and you kind of like it's like some side-scrolling stages, and you go all the way to the end of like the area that you picked, and then at the end is just a chest that I already got, and there's nothing else there, and I have to go all the way back to the beginning and pick a different route. So it's definitely a lot more time-consuming than Steamworld Dig 2 has been, and I'm probably gonna have to like maybe look up a guide just to see where I'm supposed to go. I really think like the best way to play that game is probably to actually physically draw a map of like what each door does and where it brings you, because there is no in-game map or anything like that. This is a remake of an old Master System game, and it's great that it's so faithful, but also it carries the problems of the earlier games. Some quality of life stuff isn't there, and makes it just a little bit more difficult to play. So I'm probably gonna have to do some work in looking into where I'm supposed to go, but I do want to finish that game up. I love the art style of it, and what they've done on that remaster. It's just really awesome. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to wrapping that one up soon too, hopefully.
Do you even know like how far into the game you are? Like if you're like a third of the way, halfway?
I've read the game's only like 5 hours to beat, and I am, I think, over like 3.5. But I think at least 1 hour of that has just been me wandering around aimlessly trying to figure out where to go. I think there are like 6 different transformations that your character can get or unlock in that game, and I have 3 so far. So that means I need to find 3 more, and I literally just don't know where to go right now. There's actually a room, I remember when I was playing it a little while ago, that you can go in and like it's like a little portal, and then you go in there, and then you can pick which different like animal you want to change into, because each animal has different powers to help you get through different parts of the level.
Right.
But I do not remember where that room is, and I like can't figure out how to get back there. So I'm gonna have to like look that up, I think. I mean, I really can't waste any more time just wandering around like an idiot.
Oh, I mean, you certainly could. I mean, there's nothing really stopping you. There's nothing penalizing you in the game.
That's true, yeah. But I guess for my own sanity, I kind of want to wrap that up and play something else.
I mean, I can certainly understand that. See, I'm a lot the same way, where you look on something like howlongtobeat.com to see how long a game usually takes to beat it. Whatever that time is, where a game's like, oh, it takes like 5 hours or it takes 10 hours. For me personally, you can always add on like at least 3 hours to
Right.
that ending time, either due to me exploring the area and trying to get like all those secret collectibles, or due to sheer incompetence as I'm trying to like beat the game, and there's like a solution right in front of my face, and I'm wandering around for hours thinking, where am I supposed to go?
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Yeah, I love to explore. I'm always afraid I'm missing something, so I'll like, I notice I do that a lot, even in like God of War, right? Like, I'm in one room and there's a door that leads like to the way out of the room, which is like clearly the way you're supposed to go, and then like another hallway, and like I'll walk out the way you're supposed to go and realize that's how the story continues, and then I'll backtrack and go back in that one hallway and see what was down there. And sometimes it's just like a chest, so I'm in and out of there, but sometimes it's like another hallway leading to like another room that has some more enemies in it and stuff, and so it'll take like a little longer to just get me out of the area entirely. So it just adds onto the gameplay time.
Yep, you're preaching to the choir. I'm the exact same way, especially when playing most games, especially God of War.
Speaking of God of War, that's it for me this week. And Chris, I know you have been playing it some more.
I have been playing it a lot more. My name is Christopher Gold. I am addicted to God of War.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah. When I first started playing God of War, life was good. No, life is still good. Because God of War is good. It's honestly like one of the best games I've ever played. I've beaten God of War, actually.
Oh, this week?
Yep. Yeah, I actually wrapped up the story. I even found the quote-unquote secret ending.
There's a secret ending? Well,
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
There is a secret ending, which I'm not going to tell you. It's a secret.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's actually really it's kind of interesting. Like at first, I was really confused by how the game ended because I mean, the whole point is you have to reach the highest peak in all the realms to scatter your wife's ashes. So spoilers, I did that at the end of the game,
Right.
and then it's just like, all right, that was it, and then you turn around and it's time, it's time to leave. But then the game is then like there's a pop-up and the game tells you, oh, you've completed the main quest, but there's still so much more for you to do. Like there's Valkyries to fight, there's different favors that you can complete, there's different enemies that you can fight. Go and explore the world, there's so much to do. And then the game just lets you continue, and I was just like, oh, so there isn't just kind of like a hard ending. Like it doesn't just stop. It's just literally like, yeah, you beat the main quest, now just keep playing the game. And I was like, okay. I've got no issue with that.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's, oh my god, I don't really have too much wrong or like too many negatives to say about God of War. Like I'm struggling to think of even a couple. I think the only ones I can really say are the ones I addressed last week, where I mentioned the camera can be a little spotty during combat. Like if something is attacking you from the side and you're trying to turn around to like hit it.
Right.
But yeah, outside of that, and that's honestly a stretch because having to turn around a little bit is not that big a deal. The game always felt like challenging but fair. Like there wasn't an obstacle that I felt like, all right, this is just a piece of cake. Yeah, this isn't these guys are pushovers. The enemies they scale up with you as you level up throughout the game. So I always felt like whenever there was an enemy encounter, there was always that momentary like, oh boy, here we go, because these guys might give me they might give me a good battle. Combat was really intuitive and just felt good fighting and beating the crap out of these enemies. The sounds of the game I talked about from before, it was just like every heavy footstep when you're again ripping bad guys apart, that just noise they make like you're ripping a grapefruit in half. Just yeah.
Anytime you can rip a Draugr apart is like so satisfying.
It really, really is. I mean, even just the like and the quiet moments where you're like paddling in the boat, you're telling stories or you're having conversations with Atreus or Mimir. The sounds of the world serpent whenever he speaks to you, just man, I just love everything about this game. It's funny too because I went back and I watched videos of Kratos and earlier God of War gameplay from like the first games in the original trilogy, and
right.
It's like night and day. Like the difference between that character and this character. Like in the original games, Kratos was, I mean, he was just a ball of anger and destruction. Like he didn't care about anything other than himself and his own vengeance, and he was honestly just like a very flat, one-dimensional character. He's just like, oh, I'm gonna kill everything I see, damn the consequences. But in like in this game, like, yeah, he's still violent and he still like will rip the hell out of any enemies he sees, but he's also like more thoughtful and caring, and you can see in his eyes like there's pain and regret. And this is this is a Kratos who's actually developed and grown, and you can see and experience his own growth as a character throughout this game. And oh man, just the characters in this game, every single one of them just feels so full and realized. Each one of them, the side characters, the main characters, all go through these different arcs that have satisfying payoffs at the end. And it's just, oh man, I don't know, Justin. Like, Red Dead Redemption 2, to me, is probably the strongest contender against God of War at the end of the year for Game of the Year. But right now, God of War is easily top of my list. I love it so much. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got a lot of people's attention, that's for sure. How many hours did it take you to finally beat it?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
If
I,
I'm
it
gonna
doesn't
be
really
perfect,
tell you, right? I wish that the PlayStation had some sort of clock, like,
yeah,
you know.
it doesn't really tell you, and I mean, I wasn't really paying too much attention. I mean, it's not one of those things where it's like, all right, time to hop on video games, and I punch in, I put in my time card,
Yeah.
punch in, and then it's like, oh, well, that was a productive 4 hours, and then I punch out.
Like the whistle blows, like from the Flintstones. Then you slide down to your brontosaurus's tail and
Yeah,
hop into your car.
ba-da-ba-doo. Chris Gold, let's meet Chris Gold.
He likes video games and he likes.
We can edit this out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's man, yeah, God of War, just one of my favorite game, easily my favorite game this year. Honestly, one of my favorite games that I've probably ever played, like ever. I just and the game also it very easily sets itself up for sequels in the future. So I can't wait to see what Sony Santa Monica has coming down the pipe.
Totally. Did you mess around with the newly added photo mode at all yet?
No, I didn't. All the more reason to go back and play the game even more.
Yeah, I was messing around with it the other day. Two things. One, it's actually really in depth of like, in terms of someone who is probably a photographer or an amateur photographer, they really would like because of just the options of like, oh, you gotta set your f-stop, you gotta set your exposure rate, your who to focus on, like your lighting, like all the options that they give you are just really like surprising.
Really?
Yeah. And the second thing that's really weird is that you can change the facial expressions of Kratos and Atreus, and there are like 16 to choose from, and the 15 of them are ridiculously goofy. So you can make like Kratos like roll his eyes or like smile like a big dopey smile or like wink and like, and seeing that for knowing his character and seeing these faces, like they just don't match up at all, and it's hilarious, but also just feels so like awkward and strange. It's really great.
That's awesome. That is actually awesome. I gotta try that out.
Yeah, check it out. What else are you playing?
All right, so believe it or not, I did play something else besides God of War this past week. Decided to dive into the Switch a little bit and see what was in the eShop library. And I noticed this title that they had announced, I guess a couple months ago, as coming out as part of one of their Nindies packages, I suppose. And this game is Lightfall.
That sounds familiar.
It's sort of a platforming game where as you're running along, you can create blocks beneath your feet, and they can be additional platforms to help launch you to get to platforms that you couldn't have reached with your normal jump. And I gotta say, like, from a gameplay perspective, Lightfall really, really works. I love just like the different challenges and platforms that they have, where the game is designed in such a way where it encourages kind of like a free running sort of atmosphere. Like the stages are very long and they're very flat, and occasionally there's a vertical column in front of you, so you'll naturally want to jump over that. And then as you're in the air, you'll see a horizontal like platform in front of you a little bit, like a ways away from you. So you'll want to hit A, which will drop a block right beneath you, and at that point, the block, it's actually kind of cool. Like, with your momentum, the block will follow you for a little bit and give you enough time after you drop the block to then hit jump, and then you'll jump off that block and then land on that platform that you'd seen earlier.
Oh, that sounds cool. It's like an action movie stunt or something.
Yeah, it's like really, really cool, and it's very intuitive too. You can create up to 4 of those blocks before your feet have to touch solid ground again. So say there's something way high above you, you can jump and then hit the block and then jump again and then create a block and keep doing that to reach high up places. But then, again, you'd have to land on solid ground to reset the number of blocks that you can generate. And it's really interesting, too. It's very intuitive because it's a platformer. So there are times where you'll jump and you'll screw up. And naturally, just pure instinct, I'll hit the jump button again to be like, no, don't fall. And as soon as I'm falling, I'll hit the button and a block will appear below me and it will catch my fall. And then I can recover myself and I can jump back up to where I want to get. And the game has wall jumping naturally. So as long as you're near a wall, you can just jump on the wall and you can climb up it by, you jump and then you land higher up on the wall and you can climb up that way.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, the gameplay is really a lot of fun. You can also create, when you're on the ground, you can create the block by pressing the X button where you can move it around. So say in front of you there's a laser shooting down that will impede your progress. And this is the type of game where it's one-hit kills. So if you touch lasers, crystals fall into a pit, you die instantly.
Okay.
So there's a laser in front of you. You don't want to touch the laser. So you hit X and you create the floating block. And you can float it in front of the laser to block its progress. And then you hit X again to set the block in place. And then you can just run under the laser.
So it's like some strategy of where you place the box.
Yes, and finally, you can hit the Y button, which will kind of shoot the block out in front of you, just really rapidly in a psh move, which it's supposed to block ice crystals, and it's an offensive move, so if you see any enemies, you can knock them out.
I don't think I've heard of this, but it sounds pretty sweet. Is it only on Switch?
I don't think so. I think it may also be on PC. It may be on... PlayStation and Xbox also, but I playing it on the Switch, so I know for a fact it's on Switch.
Right.
Yeah, so I really like the gameplay a lot. Narratively, I'm not as sold on the game, just from a story perspective, because it's setting up this whole thing where it takes place in this land called Numbra, where it's constantly night outside, and there's this group of people called the Complus who were originally living in this other area of the world that was plagued by war and conflict. So they decided to move to Numbra, where it was night constantly, but it was also peaceful. And then things happened mysteriously that nobody knows what happened. And I know all of this because it's narrated by a talking owl. And what's his name? What's his name? The owl's name is Spinks or some. I think that's what his name is.
Voiced by James Earl Jones.
I wish. No, his voice reminds me more of, do you remember the very old Tootsie Roll commercial where he's like, Mr. Owl, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll Center Tootsie Pop?
A two,
yeah.
a three.
Let's find out. A 1, a 2, a 3, 3. That's more the voice that they're going for. This owl is oh my, the land of Numbra is plagued by darkness and shadows. You'd best be careful lest you fall victim to the dark.
Crunch. Sir, do you have to eat Tootsie Pops as you record?
Back off! They're mine, damn you! And he just shoves all these Tootsie Roll Pops in his beak.
He says how many licks, but that third one's not a lick. The third one's a bite.
Yeah,
he just crunches it.
Yeah, because he doesn't care. He's a lazy owl. He doesn't want to go through all those different licks.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wants to eat the Tootsie Roll Pops. Better be careful. That's how you get diabetes. So, the owl befriends your character pretty early on, and I feel like the owl is, unnecessarily sassy to you in the very beginning. He meets your character and he's like, "Oh my, who is this? Oh, you have no memory of where you came from? How curious. Well, I suppose I better stick with you until you can figure out what's going on. Try not to mess too much up in the early going." And I'm like, whoa. Like, calm down. We just met.
Yeah, who the hell are you?
Yeah, there's one sequence early in the game where, you're controlling a boat, and, there's just this giant rock in front of you. So you jump off the boat to land on the rock, and the boat just sinks right in front of the rock, and the owl is like, "Oh, you've gone and crashed the boat. I leave you for 5 seconds and you already ruined the boat. I can't trust you to do anything." I'm like, fuck you! That boat was sinking no matter what I did.
Wow.
Yeah, the owl's a jackass. I'm not a fan of the owl. But yeah, so there's these guardians I have to free and all this stuff. I'm barely paying attention. Honestly, the story is just not grabbing me. Gameplay wise, though, the game is very fun. I love when the game is just here's a sequence for you to jump around and explore, go right ahead. So I'm like, all right. So yeah, jump around, get to mess around, try to go as fast as I can, and it's a lot of fun. Just not really into the story.
All right. Yeah, it sounds cool.
And that's it for me, with one notable exception. The Indie Arcade.
Indie Arcade.
If you guys recall from last week, I assigned Chris the game The Swords of Ditto to play and talk about. Chris, take it away.
So, The Swords of Ditto is... it's not necessarily a co-op game, but I was led to believe that the game is more fun as a co-op experience. So I recruited both Elena and Nick's PS4 controller to help me play the Swords of Ditto over the weekend.
Right.
So the two of us sat down and we started the game together, and man, I can't lie. I really, really wanted to like Swords of Ditto, but this is the type of game I have played so many different times. And I just feel like the Swords of Ditto didn't really do enough to differentiate itself and give a unique this is this is different.
So when you say that, do you mean it's just another roguelike, or it's just another top-down adventure game? What is it most similar to that's not fresh enough?
It just feels like another top-down adventure game, honestly. It reminded me a lot of the Legend of Zelda series, especially Link to the Past and those earlier 2D Zeldas where it has the top-down perspective, down to the point where I believe when you first start out, you awaken on a beach. So, I think I had talked to, I had mentioned this before because I was discussing the game with Nick. Gave him a little sneak peek at what I was going to say here. But yeah. I felt like the game, there's a point where a game tends to quote unquote wear its influences on its sleeve. Like, you see a lot of games that come out nowadays and you say, oh, these elements remind me of older games that came out before. Like God of War's camera perspective reminds me a lot of Resident Evil 4's camera perspective, which came out that came out 13 years ago. Ugh. Oh, yeah. God. But anyway, so there are influences there, but it's not directly obvious. I feel like the Swords of Ditto doesn't necessarily wear its influences on its sleeve so much as it wears the t-shirt with the hat and the matching hoodie that goes with it. It's just so, the game, I don't want to say derivative. That's too mean, but it's very obvious that, not too much gameplay-wise is changed from the original, from a Zelda-type game. The art style is very good. I love the world is beautiful and colorful. The characters are really fun-looking and cartoony. I love the whole aesthetic that the game has going on. It's it's a very fun game to look at. The enemies, the combat just isn't really all that great to me. You just go up to enemies and swing your sword until they're dead. And that's really it. There's no variety to how you can take out the enemies. The enemies themselves are designed very uniquely. There's lots of different enemy types all across the world map, but in terms of actually taking them down, it's just swipe your sword, swing, and they're dead. If they start attacking you, run away a little bit and try to attack them from a different angle. That's really it. It just didn't excite me, and it didn't excite Elena either.
So you had mentioned in the beginning that you felt a little bit misled about the idea of it being a co-op game. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Well, I said I was led to believe that it was better as a co-op experience, because I felt like it would be more fun to play this game with somebody. You can certainly play the game by yourself and go through the game with just one person. But if you had another person helping you out, that could potentially enhance the fun of the game. It did to an extent. We were, Elena and I were both having, we were having a fairly good time exploring the world, trying to get through everything. I feel like the roguelike nature of the overworld map was a little confusing, and it was cumbersome to have to navigate, because we were trying to reach all the different dungeons that we needed to reach to progress through the game. The whole story is every 100 years, the Sword of Ditto, quote unquote, is this warrior. It's the title of this warrior who rises up to protect the land. And the Sword of Ditto protects the land from the evil witch Mormo, who also rises up every 100 years. And the whole point is you rise up and Mormo rises up and you fight each other. And I believe ordinarily the Sword of Ditto loses? I'm pretty sure. I don't remember 100% if we're being perfectly honest. But you and Mormo clash, and then if Mormo wins, then she reigns for another 100 years, and then a new Sword of Ditto rises up to challenge Mormo's rule. And in that intervening 100 years, the world changes around. So that's how they explain the roguelike nature of the overworld map. The way the map is structured in this roguelike setting is each area of the game has these different doors and paths and passageways. It's got different dirt paths that you can traverse to get to new areas, and some areas are closed off to others. You have to really look at the map and study it and figure out, okay, maybe we need to go into that area, and then if we're there, we have to go into the top right section and leave through there, because maybe a new area of the world will unlock from there. and you have to kind of make your way to the dungeons, and you have to be a certain level because it's kind of like an RPG. You kill enough enemies, you get experience points, you level up. And as you level up, you gain the ability to enter certain dungeons. Like the first dungeon we went into, we had to be level 3, which we were. We reached that pretty easily, just roaming around the world, fighting every enemy we saw, and we leveled up pretty quickly. So we were able to get in there pretty easily. And at that point, it was, it was a fine dungeon, I guess. Like, we just run around and solve different puzzles, fight the different enemies. A lot of the puzzles didn't, like, it wasn't initially intuitive that we were solving a puzzle until we were in the middle of trying to figure something out. I inadvertently killed Elena more times than I can count, just trying to, like I was picking up this one crystal, and I was like, oh, come over here, I have a crystal. And she would walk on this platform, and I would pick up the crystal, and the crystal deactivated the platform she was standing on, so she would then just plummet to her death.
Yeah, that's pretty great. It reminds me of like Super Mario, the new Super Mario Bros. For like Wii. Whenever we played with somebody, there was always one person just throwing everybody off the cliff, like no matter what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's very luckily for us that we never encountered that problem whenever we played New Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, right.
Full disclosure, I was that player.
Yes, you were. So, 2018 is actually turning into a pretty funny battle of Nick versus Chris so far. You guys are kind of like a yin and yang of each other. You have Celeste ranked as one of your favorite games of the year, whereas it did absolutely nothing for him. And he has Swords of Ditto ranked as one of his favorite games of the year so far, and it seems to have not really left an impression on you. So you guys are just kind of swinging at each other so far this year.
Yeah, we're beating each other down. I feel like I'll have the upper hand by the end of the year because I'm on the podcast, he isn't. But yeah, no, I mean it's just the simple fact that like there are a lot of great games that are being released this year, and I mean his tastes are just different from mine. Like there are some people who prefer peanut butter to jelly and vice versa. These games, like that's why all these different games are being released, because they each appeal to a certain flavor. Like there are games that are universally beloved, like Breath of the Wild last year. I know for a fact Nick and I both love that game to death. A lot of people do. It's got universal appeal. Nick's, I feel like his style of game, the type of games he likes, are just different from the type of games that I like.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, so I mean, there's nothing wrong with Nick's taste in game. There's nothing wrong with my taste in games. There's definitely room for both of us to coexist. But all this is to say that I am right and Nick is wrong.
All right, well, there you have it. I still really want to try the Swords of Ditto because I'm curious to hear both your guys' points.
I mean,
so I'll be picking that up some point soon.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all just my opinion. You've heard different opinion from Nick before. Nick, if you're willing to offer your opinion, email us, parpodcast@gmail.com. And, we will read it on the show, so we can offer differing and fair opinions about the game. But yeah, Justin, if you want to give the game a shot for yourself, be my guest. Because, again, this isn't a game that, like, nobody likes, and Nick is a dissenting opinion. I feel like overall my opinion of the game is the dissenting opinion from how people overall feel about that game. So
I don't know. I've seen a lot of mixed reviews about it. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of one of those things that you kind of have to play and just see for yourself, whether it's for you or not.
yeah, that's true for most games except for Life
Yeah,
of Black
that is.
Tiger. Don't ever play that game.
Someone out there that is their favorite game of all time, and you are really upsetting them right now.
I pity that fool. I'm Mr. T. I pity that fool.
All right.
I can't imagine a complete opposite of Mr. T more than myself.
Yeah. Mr. G,
Mr. G. I pity the fool.
who does not eat all their peas at dinner.
Really missing out. Nom, 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 nom.
Iron.
Anyway, so now it's my turn to give you an indie arcade game.
I
And
believe that is how this works.
That ordinarily is how it's worked so far. I mean, I hope I'm not wrong. But either way, I'm giving you a game. And this game is it's pretty well acclaimed. I don't think you've ever played it before. I've never played it before. But it's a game that when I see a lot of people talk about indie games that are really well designed and really interesting, this is a title that usually pops up, and I'm curious about it. So, Justin, I'm giving it to you to play because I want you to provide a full report to me because I'm too lazy to do it myself.
Sounds good.
Justin, your indie arcade title for this week is Downwell.
Wow, that's so funny. Nick is actually playing that also, and he texted me about that game this week.
That's weird. That's that's a funny coincidence.
But awesome.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, if Nick is enjoying it, then, it's probably garbage. But, we'll, hopefully you'll play it, and maybe it's not so bad. So, Downwell. Downwell is a curious game about a young person venturing down a well in search of untold treasures with only his gun boots to protect him. So, the whole game, it's kind of like a top to bottom game where you go from the top of the level down, and you have these gun boots that you fire to break your fall before you land on the platforms below you. And these, it looks like that you can use these gun boots for lots of different purposes. You can break blocks, shoot enemies, etc. And it's developed by Moppin and published by good old Devolver Digital.
Yeah, I've actually heard a lot of this game. I think it came out last year at some point. And when it came out...
It says 2015.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually a lot older.
Well, then, whenever I was reading, I remember it being praised a lot for that simplicity of the mechanics, but its addictive gameplay. And that kind of stuff I love. Like, I can just kind of sit and mindlessly blast through some levels. So I'm really pumped to give this one a shot. It's a great pick.
Yep. Yeah, I'm really hoping that you enjoy it. Really simple but fun gameplay is always a winning formula.
All right. Sounds cool. What do you say we take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to dive into the history and some fun facts about Tetris.
Sounds good to me.
back to Press A repeatedly. Justin Tomaso here with Christopher Gold. And Chris, let's talk about this game that you may have heard called Tetris.
Describe Tetris to me. It sounds vaguely familiar.
Basically, they are some blocks and some lowercase L's falling from the sky, and you have to fit them in the correct pattern.
Yeah. Tetris is one of those games and franchises that's so ubiquitous and so well known all across the world that you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who has not heard of Tetris, played Tetris, seen Tetris. I mean, it's everywhere. Literally everywhere. And, I mean, it's one of the easiest games in the world to pick up and play. Like, go into your internet browser right now, type in Tetris, and you can play Tetris in a matter of seconds, like, for free.
Or get it on your phone. And, you know, that's another thing that's so great about Tetris is being a puzzle game, how, like, brilliantly it lent itself to, you know, mobile devices, which we'll get into. But, I mean, if you think about today, on your phone, playing a Tetris, it's, like, perfect. I only had, like, 2 games on my cell phone for years. It was Crossy Road, because I liked how the, like, voxel-style chicken looked, and Tetris. And I used to play Tetris all the time, like, on the subway, just kind of relaxing and getting in the zone. I almost missed my stop a few times because I was so addicted.
It really is one of the most perfect games that's ever been developed, just because of how simple it is, how intuitive it is, and just how addictive it is. Like, once you get started playing a game of Tetris, you really can't put it down right away. Like, you have to keep going for a while. It's like it's like eating chips. Yeah, you can't eat just one.
They should make a Tetris chips or like cookies or something.
They should. Oh man, Justin, I think we found our big breakthrough.
I bet they are out there somewhere.
Yeah, sell this idea to the Tetris company. They'll pay us the big bucks. But yeah, so Tetris. I mean, it's such a wonderful game, and the whole reason I brought up the idea of doing this topic was because I was thinking about this game. I mean, it's so well-known and so influential, and I was curious about where the game came from, and I just wanted to do some thinking and a little bit of research on it this week, and yeah, I'm ready to kind of talk about, like, the history, like, the origins of Tetris.
Yep, and I have some pretty shocking facts about Tetris that you won't believe. Number 7 will blow your mind.
All caps. Number 7 will blow your mind.
Chumley from Pawn Stars plays Tetris, and look at him now. Anyway, Tetris
was originally developed by Russian engineer and programmer Alexei Pajitnov back in 1984. So the man responsible for the hours and hours of gameplay sunk all across the world, especially like 30 years later, is Mr. Pajitnov here. He was actually born, I think, in the late 50s. And he grew up in the old Soviet Union, where it was in the middle of the space race, where he had first got interested in computers and technology, things like that. So that's why he wanted to become a programmer in the first place. And he got a job working with the Russian Academy of Science, and he was a programmer there. And they had these really old, ancient computers that they had to work on. I mean, it was the Soviet Union. They weren't necessarily working with the best tech at the time. So, I mean, it was like very, very, very old computers. I think by the early 70s, the computers he was working on were obsolete. And this was the early 80s he was working on these machines.
Yeah.
So he did his work during the day, but the computers, when they were done with them, were, when they were done for the day, were theirs. They could do whatever they wanted with them during their off time. And this was in the days way before porn was easily accessible. So Mr. Pajitnov had...
he had to figure out a different way to...
he had to figure out a different way to entertain himself. So he remembered this game that he used to play back when he was a child, growing up in the Soviet Union, called Petronimos. And Petronimos was this game where you had this small board, and you had these pieces of like 5 blocks each, and they were 12 pieces, and they were arranged in all sorts of different shapes, and you had to fit them together in different arrangements so that they all filled the board completely. Sound familiar? So Alexei decided, you know what? During my free time, I'm going to design a game like that. And, using his know-how, he was able to whip up the game very quickly. And he discovered very quickly a couple things. One, the limitations of the hardware he was working on. He couldn't recreate the 5 blocks that he needed for the Petronimos. So what he did was he cut it down so that each piece had only 4 blocks to it, which reduced the total number of blocks to 7. And 2, the game where you just take these blocks and fit them onto the board until it was all filled in was extremely boring. Because once you filled in this board with the blocks, that was it, game over. And once you knew what the solution was, you just repeated that over again. There was nothing to it. There was no more challenge.
Right. It's like a puzzle at that point.
Yeah, so he was like, all right, let me just rearrange things. So he lengthened the board and made it from top to bottom, and he had it so that the pieces fell from the top. So it was coming down, and then you had to move and rotate the pieces so that they would land on the bottom. And he was like, okay, this is all fine and good, but then there was a new problem. Each of the lines, as they would stack up, would very quickly fill the board up. And eventually there was no more space left to play the game. So he made his final adjustment to this new game of his that he was working on. What if, when a row was filled in, I just deleted it, and then everything just kind of dropped down from there? And at that point, Tetris was born. And as soon as he made that adjustment where he cleared the lines out and had pretty much Tetris in its prototypical form, he could not stop playing his own creation. Like, he almost became addicted to it. Like, he even played the game during work hours when his bosses weren't looking. Which none of us have ever done.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's completely
we're professionals.
Very unprofessional behavior. Very irresponsible.
Shame on you, Mr. Pajitnov.
So, he called the game Tetris because each of the blocks had only 4 pieces to it. So, tetra is the Greek word for 4. And he also combined it with his favorite sport, tennis. Yeah, there's nothing tennis-like about the game whatsoever.
That was one of my fun facts that I had written down, so thank you for taking one away from me.
Oh, I apologize.
Just kidding. Proceed.
But yeah, so that's where the name Tetris came from. And eventually, Pajitnov showed off his game to a lot of his coworkers in the Russian Academy. And everybody who played the game fell in love with it and became addicted to it. Even Pajitnov's bosses became addicted to the game once they got wind of it.
That's pretty cool.
Let me see. So then Pajitnov was like, hey, he's an enterprising individual. He realized everybody is loving my game, is playing my game. More people should play my game and get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But the problem was this was designed on a very, very old computer that was very much out of date. How could he get this game played by other people playing on modern hardware? Enter Dmitry Pavlovsky and Vadim Gerasimov. These were Dmitry Pavlovsky was one of his coworkers who he had worked with and befriended at the academy, where Vadim Gerasimov was a 16-year-old student who was very much into programming and decided, he had befriended Pajitnov and Pavlovsky, and he wanted to eventually get a job at the academy, so he was doing some spare work there during his schooling. And the two of them collaborated to port the Tetris game over to IBM computers, which were more modern, and they were much more ubiquitous around the Soviet Union at the time. And I believe it was Vadim Gerasimov who introduced the idea of, hey, let's make each block a different color. So, he introduced colors into Tetris when he ported everything over. And from there, the game spread like wildfire. People started sharing the game and playing the game, and it just took off everywhere in the old Eastern Bloc of, behind the Iron Curtain.
Right.
And eventually, the game made its way over to Hungary. And Hungary at the time was it was probably the most Western-friendly of the Eastern European countries. So a lot of Western nations, if they wanted to do business with Eastern influences or Eastern industries, ordinarily they would go to Hungary to deal with them there. And let me see. So the game was the game was being spread there, and this person by the name of Robert Stein, who worked for a UK publisher, he caught wind of the game, and as soon as he saw the game and he played it for a little bit, he realized, oh wow, this game is a hit. Like once I get rights for this game, this thing is going to take off. So he signed a deal with Pajitnov. Like, he directly contacted him. He's like, hey, I think your game is great. I want to license the game and sell it, and make, we can make some money off of it. Now, remember, Pajitnov is he's a computer programmer. He's not a lawyer. He's not like a real businessman. All he knows is he created a thing, and he wanted to make money from it because it was so popular. So he's just like, okay. And Stein was like, great. So he started negotiating with him, and he created all of these terms that were very favorable for Stein and his company. He wanted to secure the arcade rights and the rights to sell the game on PCs in the West. And eventually the Russian government caught a hold of this and were like, nah, son. You're not doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Pajitnov is just a computer programmer. He can't negotiate these types of deals. B, technically, because Pajitnov was developing the game using Russian government computers, the game legally was Russian government property. So Pajitnov did not have rights to the game that he created in the Russians' eyes. It belonged to the government. So if Robert Stein wanted to negotiate for the game, he had to go through the Russian government. So that is as fun as you can imagine that being.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah, so there was, there's a whole lot of business intrigue that goes on behind the scenes. There's different players enter the game, like Kevin Maxwell from Maxwell Corporations, who was,
right.
He wanted the piece of the game. probably the hero of our story is Hank Rogers. Hank, don't call me Hank. Hank with an E, Rogers.
Hank.
He's the one who ultimately secured the final rights to sell, to sell the game out in the West. Because again, the game was developed in '84. The rights to sell the game weren't secured until about 1988.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a lot of years, a lot of negotiations, and there was a lot of, there was a lot of intrigue, there was a lot of backstabbing, there was a lot of dealing not necessarily in good faith. Like when Stein originally proposed his deal to sell the game overseas, he wanted to sell the game on computers, and the Russians understood that to mean, okay, computers as we know them today, with keyboard, mouse, etc. Stein intended it as computers, including home consoles, which in his eyes were computers. So it wasn't necessarily, apples to oranges there. And Hank Rogers is the one when he was negotiating, because by this point the Russians were sick and tired of dealing with Stein. And Rogers looked over the original agreement, and he's the one who noticed, hey, wait a minute, this guy's not making a distinction between home consoles and home computers. This isn't on the level. So Rogers negotiated with the Russians in good faith. The Russians appreciated this, and eventually he was able to help secure deals with Nintendo when he introduced the game to them. He knew they were about to release the Game Boy, and Nintendo bundled Tetris with the Game Boy, and that's how that was able to sell like wildfire, because they knew if they had bundled the original Game Boy with like a Super Mario game, then only children would have bought the Game Boy. But you bundle it with Tetris, everybody is buying a Game Boy.
It's very interesting. I have a few notes on that, actually. So Pajitnov, he actually didn't receive royalties until a decade after the initial release of Tetris, which was in 1984. So he didn't start getting any money from it until around 1994. But he claims that he was okay with that. He said he was just happy that people were playing something that he created and having a good time and, really enjoying a game that basically he put a lot of time into. So, if that's true, I mean, that's great. That's a really great way to look on life. But I am happy that eventually he started getting some sort of monetary income from, basically, what is his creation.
Right. Yeah, because, again, good guy Hank, he knew that Pajitnov was done dirty here. Because here was a game that was worth, forget millions, billions of dollars. And Pajitnov didn't see a cent of it. So when the rights to the game expired, he teamed up with Pajitnov and formed the Tetris company. And he purposely made Pajitnov a partner of the Tetris company so that finally the man could actually make some money from his own creation, which was long overdue.
Right, absolutely. And you were talking about how, eventually they sold the rights to Nintendo, and Nintendo did, in fact, bundle Tetris with the Game Boy. And it was part of a bundle for 5 years, which is a really long time if you think about it, because bundles typically nowadays only kind of last for maybe, less than a year. So you're talking 5 years of the Game Boy coming out with Tetris. The Game Boy version of Tetris' total sales were over 35 million copies.
Holy crap.
That is, 35 million, okay? So that is, it was for almost the entirety of the Game Boy, the best-selling game on the Game Boy, until near the end of the Game Boy's life, a certain game about raising pocket monsters came out and overthrew that. But if you think about Pokemon only sold a few more million copies, but that's also the combined numbers of red, blue, and green in Japan. So you're talking 3 games kind of combined, just barely beat Tetris.
That is absolutely incredible.
Even more interesting is that on, according to VGCharts.com, their total software sales list of like rankings of games that have sold the most through any console. Number 6 on the list is Tetris.
What's the total number?
Yeah, so that's 35 million copies for the Game Boy version of Tetris. Tetris in general, in all different forms of the game in different consoles, different computers, sold over 180 million copies, with 186. I'm sorry, in the last 30 years. That is a ridiculous number. Yeah, so the definitive versions of the games, and you can't see right now because this is a podcast, but I was doing air quotes there, of the versions of Tetris are the Game Boy version and the NES version. A lot of like the Game Boy or the Tetris World Championship players, they only play the NES version. They swear that's like the definitive way to go. So yeah, as you were saying, Nintendo had the early rights to it. But that didn't stop other companies from trying to release Tetris. Tetris did come out on the Mega Drive, and it was out for a very brief time before Nintendo caught wind of it, and Sega had to pull it down due to legal wranglings. It's believed that there are only about a few dozen copies of the Mega Drive version of Tetris floating around in the wild, and they're valued up to $16,000 for one copy of that. It's like one of the rarest things available. And there also was a collector's item. Another collector's item is that there was an Atari version of the game called Tetris, the Soviet Mind Game. And that also had to come off the shelves because of legal disputes. And there was only about 100,000 copies of that made. And a lot of people prefer that to Nintendo's versions because the Atari version featured 2-player simultaneous co-op play, and the Nintendo versions didn't have that. So that's pretty interesting.
It's actually kind of funny. I didn't go into too much detail about it, and I won't go into so much, but at one point Atari felt like that they had secured the final rights for selling Tetris in the West, which was why they produced their own version of the game, and they were actually selling cartridges. Like, they took out full-page ads like, hey, Tetris is coming to the West. They made, like, 300,000 cartridges to sell. They were having, like, gala events, like, to celebrate the release of Tetris. And, like, at the 11th hour, Nintendo swooped in and finalized the rights for themselves.
Oh, man.
And, like, I think Atari like had just started selling them when Nintendo sent them a cease and desist saying, hey, you're in direct violation of our contract. And Atari was really confused until they contacted the Russian ministry about it and got confirmation that, yeah, they had a deal with Nintendo. Yeah. I think the Nintendo of America president, Howard Lincoln, at the time, when Nintendo realized that they could secure the rights and pull the rug out from under Atari, he said, like, we're going to get these bastards by the balls.
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, business is cutthroat, man.
Yeah, that cutthroat business world. That's just an example of it.
Yep.
Well, here's some lighter-hearted facts. During that time of that decade between 1984 and 1994, Pajitnov was actually working on a few other games, and he made 2 other games that were similar to Tetris. One was called Waltris, and one was called Hatris. And Hatris is basically the same idea as Tetris, but instead of blocks falling from the sky, there are different types of hats falling from the sky. And there are different people's faces on the bottom of the screen. And basically, you just have to pile up the hats on top of their head. And when you get like 4 hats of the same kind or whatever, it'll like be like a combo and it'll disappear. So it's like it's the same game, just with hats instead of blocks.
That's funny.
Yeah. And this is my favorite fact that I found. Earlier you were mentioning how people were playing Tetris at work instead of doing work. The 1987 PC version of Tetris came with a boss button, and basically what it did, when you pressed that boss button, it pulled up a generic spreadsheet on your screen to make it look like you were working on something rather than playing a computer game at your desk.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. More games should do that.
Yeah, isn't that ingenious?
Oh man, how has the boss button not caught on?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's so great though. Like a boss come around the corner, you just go whoop, and you click the button real quick, and it's just some sort of generic like Excel ripoff gibberish on the screen. The boss looks at your screen and goes, mm-hmm, and then keeps on walking, and then when he leaves the cubicle, you just click it again and go back to your game. I think it's brilliant.
It really is. Yeah, it's oh my god. Yeah. I love that. I love that idea so much.
And lastly, I have a little bit of science for you, Chris. Have you ever heard of the Tetris effect or Tetris syndrome?
Oh, really? What is that?
Yeah, so Tetris syndrome is basically the sensation of having mental images and dreams based around a game or activity that you have devoted a large amount of time to. So, like, if you've ever started stacking up a bunch of boxes in the supermarket, it was probably due to the Tetris effect. But scientists say that Tetris is actually good for your brain. They've done some research that proves the game will help players develop a thicker cortex and may also increase your brain efficiency. And the positive effects of Tetris are apparently good for people who are trying to quit smoking and who are going on diets.
Wow. I
Yeah.
had no idea.
So I guess it just kind of works with your brain waves to kind of help you get off of some bad habits, I guess, and focus on something else. So I find that to be really interesting. And also, for those of you who don't know, we record this podcast in South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. And the largest game of Tetris ever played was played in Philadelphia on a 437-foot skyscraper. It was organized by a game designer, Frank Lee, and players were able to drop pieces down the side of a 29-story building using a joystick. And he pulled off the similar architectural stunt in 2013 with Pong, basically Pong on the side of a skyscraper.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. And also, the smallest ever version of the game was played with an electron microscope using 42 glass microspheres at the Department of Physics of Complex Systems in Amsterdam. So some scientists were very bored in Amsterdam one day.
Yeah, how's that, how are those, antimatter particles looking? Oh, they're looking good. So they're like peeking down their microscope, and then do.
Yeah, just some real crazy stuff about Tetris.
Yeah, who would think that such a simple and addictive game would like have such a mass following behind it and inspire just so much creativity and passion from so many different people across the globe.
And just probably create an entire genre. Like, it was one of the first puzzle games that ever come out. Like a game without a character or action or killing. Like you're just putting pieces together to get like a high score. I mean, that must have just really been pretty innovative at the time. And if you look about how not just puzzle games in general, but also Tetris itself has evolved over the years. I mean, most recently, when Puyo Puyo Tetris came out for the Switch last year, I guess another version of Tetris still coming out, available to play with new modes, new interactive, like 4-player co-op. Like Tetris is an institution that's going to be around, has been around for 30 years, and I would not be surprised to see it 30 years from now in other shapes and forms.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Tetris is not going away anytime soon. It's entered the realm of those classic type of games. Like you talk about Tetris in the same air as one talks about Pong or Super Mario Brothers or the original Final Fantasy or any of those other classic games that a lot of people just really know and love and enjoy. It's just one of the best games out there. I mean, I don't have to tell anybody out there that it's. I mean, who out there plays Tetris and is like, this game sucks? Like, nobody hates Tetris. Nobody. It's literally impossible.
Get it on your phones. It's perfect. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, get it on your phones. Play it on your computers.
Get the boss button.
Yeah, use the boss button. It's one of the best. And just as a quick, like, where are they now today? Alexei Pajitnov still works for the Tetris company as one of its key chairmen. Whenever there's any changes or subtle additions made to the game of Tetris, he always has final say on if those changes will go through or not. So he's doing very well for himself. Let me see.
That's great.
And I believe I don't remember exactly, either Dmitry Pavlovsky or Vadim Gerasimov. I believe it's Vadim because he was only 16 at the time. Today he actually works as an engineer at Google.
Wow.
Yep. So
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So everyone there lives happily ever after, except probably Robert Stein and everyone else who lost out on the deal for Tetris. But wonderful, wonderful game. Some sources for a lot of my facts and information. A lot of it came not just from like the Tetris Wikipedia page, but I can't recommend enough. There's a video on YouTube by the gaming historian called The History of Tetris. It's about an hour long, but the way the video is presented and it's styled and the information it presents, it's so well done and so informative. That was really a key source behind a lot of the information I provided here. Give it a look. It goes a lot deeper into the story than I really gave it here. And it's really, really worth a watch. Highly recommended. And that's The Gaming Historian, The History of Tetris.
Yep, that's awesome. And for me, I mentioned earlier VG charts, where I got my stats for software numbers, and I got most of my fun facts from an article by DigitalSpy.com called 30 Years of Tetris, 30 Amazing Facts About the Gaming Classic. They put that out about 4 years ago when it was Tetris' 30th anniversary. It was a great read, so check that out. And 34 years of Tetris and still going strong.
Yep. I mean, one of the best. What more can you say?
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week, Chris. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up. I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to go play some Tetris now. I've talked about it so much, I'm just in the mood.
Jonesing for it. Okay, well, that's all for this week. Remember, Press A repeatedly posts new episodes Tuesdays on iTunes, Google Play, Podbean, YouTube, and Spotify. If you like what you hear, please take a moment to rate and review the show, or tell your friends about us. It helps other people find the podcast and will really help us grow. And thank you to all who have rated, reviewed, and subscribed so far. We love you.
You can follow us on our Facebook page or on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Press A Repeatedly. I'm at cgold113. Justin is at oaf7724. You can email us any questions or comments at parpodcast@gmail.com. That's parpodcast@gmail.com. That's all for this week. Chris and Justin signing off. And remember to hard drop all your tetrinimos so you can quickly lose the game. Press A repeatedly.
I've done that more than I care to admit.
Yeah, same.